marriage probably won't return until more women lose jobs.
You want to say a few words about modern marriage versus traditional marriage, and can Black marriage in this country be saved?
Whew.
I know
Oh,
that's
man.
we have to dedicate a whole show to that one, but
That was really, really good question. Let me start with the latter. You said, can Black marriage be saved? Um, I'll give you my optimistic answer and I'll give you my realistic answer. My
okay.
optimistic answer is yes, but probably never to the degree that it was before. It'll probably never, ever, ever get to the degree of where it was before, if I'm honestly speaking. I think the cat's been let out of the bag in terms of, as we've seen women in general and our women get more rights, more privileges, more freedoms. We've seen how they responded and behaved once they got them. And men will never unsee what they saw in our women. They saw the ghetto-ness, they saw the debauchery, they saw the lack of respect in men. They saw and hear things like, we don't need men. Men are irrelevant. Do we need men anymore? We'll choose a bear over a man. All men are this. All men are that. All men are dogs. They've seen the Aisha Curry examples, the Jada Pinkett examples of how when women share too much or do too much in the public space, how they'll constantly defend women no matter what they do, and they'll constantly demonize men even when they don't have all the facts, or the case hasn't even been ruled by a judge or a jury. If a man's involved, a woman's involved, we see how a lot of them move. So just on the male side alone, there's the there already is going to be that there's a generation between just above the millennials and millennials, especially the older millennials. There's a percentage of men that's never going to marry. They've already made that decision off of them seeing how bad things have gotten with what they've observed just in the women alone. On the flip side, there's a percentage of women who have seen what they've seen in men, partially because of personal experiences, personal choices with the men they've actually done life with, the men that they chose, the men that they slept with, the men they gave children to. And when it didn't work, so many of them are so jaded and so many of them have such negative views and perspectives on men. They're now functionally at a place where they see men as adversaries, as enemies, as predators. They don't see us as companions or partners or leaders. They see and I think they've also equated, and this is out of every single demographic, the women, to my knowledge, have a higher educational rate than the men. All of them, white. I think Asians, the men and women kind of take turns. I think Latin, Black, all the women are pushing to get their education. There's one group where there is a very common thread of taking the view of having a higher level of education and seeing that as being better than all the men that don't have that same level of education. And that's our community. So when people ask me like, well, what are your thoughts about the state of the Black community and marriages in the future? Well, if one sex sees, meaning men, sees so many of these horrifically bad attributes, where statistically, I think before the age of 29, I think women have a much more likelihood of having children prior to 25, or I think it's prior to 25 than their male counterparts. And then men start focusing in the Black community and having kids at 30 plus to start their families. That means a lot of the pool of Black men that are waiting till 30 plus to have kids are entering into a dating market where they want to start their own family. A huge percentage of the women already have a packaged family for him ready with the kid or kids that they have from one or multiple men. Like that's a model that's just clearly not, a lot of men are just not going to sign up for it. Period. They're just not, on top of the trend that they saw with women in general. In terms of divorce rates, in terms of alimony, in terms of weaponization of the child support system, in the family court process. So, like, no, optimistically, I'd be hopeful for it, but from a pragmatic and realistic level, no. I actually think that we're going to get to a place where it's going to be a line that's drawn between those that see the value in the opposite sex and those that don't. And those that do, whether it's legally married or married through the church or a mosque or whatever, there's going to be those that see value and come up with their own arrangement of how to do life together. And then there's those that's just going to always be talking about how the other side is toxic and bad and evil and wrong. And if the marriage rates are going to improve over the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be because a whole lot of men would have settled for women that have that are older, can't give them children, and are bringing children that weren't his to the table, and women signing up to be with men 5, 10, 20 years from now that would have never been their first, second, or third choice that they felt they settled for. That's what's more than likely going to be in the future if the marriage rates are going to return, because the people, when they're in their prime, when they're in their 20s, um, the ladies think that, you know, they can keep waiting until a certain point to start family and get serious and get out of their phase, which for me, I don't, and personally, I'm not going to call it a whole phase, but like the 304 phase or the have fun phase. I'm going to be honest with you. It's just not enough men for them to end up being on the other end of men that they actually want, that's going to actually take them seriously when they've waited too long to do that. So, no, I think that a lot of them will be the bitter aunties. They'll be the bitter men that'll talk about the opposite sex until the day they die, and they'll use each other for sex as needed. They'll use each other for resources, certain experiences, but they'll never get to the point of them being able to potentially learn what they needed to learn earlier so that they can have a different outcome. I guess I have a strange feeling that I have a strange feeling that you know, the birth rates are declining. So as birth rates are declining, as relationships are in shambles, uh, I think that I'm going to see a scenario where at least men who have the means and ability to find a suitable partner, if they can't find it here, they'll just find it in another race, culture, or abroad. And then the ladies, you know, they're kind of going to be in tough luck, because when it comes to the ladies, there aren't a whole lot of men globally that are signing up to marry westernized American women. They're not running to the pool. They're not running to the pool where women that have such high rates of initiating divorce and breakups and seeking child support, men around the world aren't signing up outside of getting a green card to, oh, the women that divorce the most, yeah, that's the pool of women I'm going to date or try to marry. That's not that's not a reality. You good?
Of all the days for this to happen. Okay,
All
we're at
good,
the
all
end. We're
good.
at the end. Well, go ahead, complete your thought. I think you were responding.
Yeah, I was just saying that besides the birth rates failing at the degree that they are, the declining birth rates, the difference is that the optionality for men and women changes as they get older. So women who are clearing 34, 35, 38, 40 plus, the market's never going to be the same for the majority of them if a huge percentage of the men that would have taken you seriously want to build with you, want to start a family, and you can't offer that. Or they'll take a woman, and if you are very beautiful, if he has the option to get a woman like you, he also gets the option of getting with a woman that looks just like you and younger. So, in three, most men in the globe, I just mentioned it before you got on, a lot of men are not, a lot of men around the world aren't signing up to go to the countries where divorce is the highest and being initiated the most by women. They're gonna try to get with cultures and women that still prioritize staying in marriages, staying in relationships, still seeing, not seeing cooking a meal or serving a plate as slavery, not not the sob stories of everything that went wrong in a relationship is because he doesn't know how to do this or do that. Like they're just going to try to go with women that just see value in men and want the men to be men, the women to be women. That's a thing. And the more progressive that we become, and the more assertive and aggressive our women have become, not just black women, but women in the states in general, the less attractive they are to the sex that they're claiming they want to do life with. So yeah, in general, and in Gen Z's the wild card, believe it or not, out of this whole discussion. And the part of it is because they're split completely down the middle with major topics. I was looking at an article that came out from NBC back in September. I think they had did an exit poll of like almost 3,000 voters, and they were comparing Kamala Harris voters to Trump voters, and especially male and female Kamala Harris voters versus male and female Trump voters. And the top two things, there was 13 things to choose from, and they got to pick out what their order is. That they had to pick 3 out of the 13. For what was it, for Trump male voters, having children and being married was in their top 4 choices. Whereas the female voters for Trump, and I'll make sure I read it to make sure I'm not off, number 6 was having children, and number 9 was being married. So even on the female side of the conservative voting bloc, having children and being married was lower of a priority to the women, but it was still in the top 10 for the females that voted for Trump. And the male voters, those were in the top 5. Having children and being married. Conservative people who thought and voted for Trump, that was higher on the list for them than the people who voted for Harris. And then when you thought about the policies, you thought about the ideology, you thought about the practices that's being pushed, what policies are seeming to be pro-family and anti-family, pro-boys and sons and anti, divisive versus, collaborative. And it was very, very clear that to me is also representation, not just of the respondents in that study. They showed the studies even right after the election. It was split like that, where Gen Z in particular, the boys and the girls, the young men and the young women were diametrically opposed. Well, if you get a huge block of men that sees value in marriage and value in having children, and the young ladies don't, what's going to end up happening is all those men are not going to not look for a suitable woman. They're just going to go around the planet till they find the women that or bring them here to start those lives with. Whereas the ladies that saying that's not high on the list, I'll wait till 30, I'll wait till 32, I'll wait till 35. They all want, I'll freeze my eggs. A lot of them going to waste a whole lot of money. So the reality is like, that's why I'm so conflicted, because at least one half of the gender, it's even one half of the younger demographic being Gen Z, it's the men that are thinking about the societal collapse. It's the men that are thinking about wanting to still have children and have families and being married. All those men are not going to just live the next 30, 40, 50 years alone. They're going to look for women that prioritize that, probably more conservative leaning, or they're going to go to other countries and cultures where there's certain conservative or traditional values, and they're going to give those women access to those things, their resources, investment accounts, building, traveling together, and then you're going to have everybody else. Now, what's the most concerning to me is all the liberal men that are thinking just like and being led by their liberal female counterparts. It's crazy. So that's my lens where I think that I won't be shocked if it gets worse, or it pretty much stays pretty much the same. But I also won't be shocked if it ends up doing the opposite, where there's almost like a pendulum swing. And now it's no longer as cool to be anti-family and be like so obsessed about abortion, or so obsessed about certain things versus like the actual things that we know a society and culture needs to actually survive. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, as more and more jobs get replaced with AI, I think as more and more job opportunities are scarce, as government resources are tapped, I won't be shocked if the groups that are most affected, especially women, start changing their tune. And that may be the thing that kind of pushes us to kind of making this a revamp of relationships and men and women getting back along together. One thing has been abundantly clear: in westernized cultures and societies, women view the past through the lens that when men had all the rights, they abused it, they weaponized it, they lorded it over the women in their lives, so to speak. That's just how they view the past, even if it's not really tangibly true for most women or even all women. My view is that it wasn't the case for most women, because most women back in the day, when it was the suffragettes versus the anti-suffragettes, more women were against feminism than they were for it initially. Which means that maybe in my mind, I don't think all the ladies were seeing their situation as bad as the feminists were seeing it back at that time. Now, the men have had the opportunity to see the reverse. When women have gotten their rights, when women have gotten these perks, when women have gotten more and more things in the culture and in working environments and in political power, how has that resulted in changing and shaping society? Most people objectively would say, outside of women having access to vote, maybe more industries that they were in before and be able to make their own money, almost everything else in society is worse. Women got what they wanted. And my lens is marriage probably won't return until more women lose jobs. As sucky as it sounds, I don't think it's going to be because they suddenly just have this epiphany and realize men are still valuable in cultures. I don't think that. I don't think that they're going to think that way. I think that they're going to start thinking that men are valuable when they lose jobs, when they lose access to resources, when SNAP benefits don't get kicked back on, or there's major cuts in certain areas. Now all of a sudden men matter again. But when they had the ability to replace those men, it is what it is. Kentucky, not too long ago, we saw the 50-50 custody change and the divorce rates plummeted by 25% just like that. So if less and less government intervention is in place, if less and less safeguards are in place, I won't be shocked if now the buffers of the things that were ladies are able to use to supplement the lack of men's presence is gone. Now they'll see the value of doing life with another person. So yeah, so that's what I honestly think will probably happen.